Hello, good afternoon, wherever you're watching me from. I'm super excited to be your moderator for the final day of MCT West Africa Bootcamp. My name is Raphael, and we have very exciting lineup of activities today. If you're just joining us for the first time, we have very good prizes and amazing stuff for you to win. Just make sure you attend each of the session, and during the session, you fill the evaluation form. So, my as I said earlier, my name is Raphael. I'm a cloud engineer and a very experienced DevOps professional, and I have a very exciting guest that is waiting in the next few minutes. I'm going to be telling us. I'm going to be bringing him to the show. And before we start, I want to say thank you to our amazing sponsors. This would not have been possible without Microsoft, Hashem, Charis Cloud, and the rest of it. So the first session today is Azure cloud governance and vulnerability assessment. And the 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 host for the session is no other than Mr. Lanre. Mr. Lanre knows his stuff. Okay, he knows his stuff, his experience. He has paid his dues, and I'm gonna be bringing him on to. I'm gonna be passing the baton to him to to spend the next few minutes with us and tell us, uh, to teach us what we know, what he knows. Good afternoon, Mr. Lanre. I think your mic is on mute. Can you, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me correctly?
Perfect. Yes.
How are we doing?
Good.
Great. So, I have to put some African stuff on so that it looks purely African, right?
Yes, it is. So I can't wait. I have my pen and my little jotter here with me because I'm going to be taking notes as a good student. So I leave the baton to you. So you can share your screen and let the show begin, bro. Let the show begin.
Oh, I'm going to share my screen. Just a moment. And I want to believe that everyone can see my screen.
Hold on just a minute. Not yet. So I'm going to be removing myself.
Is that visible now? So I'm sharing my entire. Okay, so I think we should be fine now. Okay. Are we good now? Can you hear me? Yeah, I want to be sure everyone can hear me clearly. Okay, so I want to believe everyone can see my screen. So just be sure that you hear me clearly. Okay, I think this is fine. All right, thanks everyone. Just let me confirm that my screen is visible. Okay, so thanks so much, everyone, for joining. And this morning, I'm just going to quickly take us through Azure Cloud Security Governance, and then it's going to be in two parts. I'm not going to dwell much on the AZSK tools. What I just wanted to show is how we can validate the control, right, for Azure Security Governance, basically. And we're going to be looking at one or two pieces and all that, right, from the governance, from control, from guardrails, and from every piece that come together, right, to ensure your resources, your workload, from infrastructure perspective, either as EAS or PaaS and perspective, how we can have a control of the protection, either from the cloud security posture or from cloud role protection perspective. So as I said, I mean, for me, I've been around, in the last 14 years, implementing, security, digital transformation across Microsoft and non-Microsoft solution. I mean, security at large, right? 10 domains of security, from security engineering to reality assessment, pen testing, and security governance, and then bringing that to cloud, right? And I'm talking from cloud agnostics, whether IBM or Oracle Cloud or Microsoft, right? But because I spent long years in Microsoft solutions, right, I get passionate about Microsoft security. when the topic comes up, right? And of course, I'm also the lead of the Nigerian security community, where we look at not just Microsoft solutions, our third-party solutions coming into Microsoft as well, right? We look at holistically at all of that, right? And then involving a couple of things as well. Have organizations that are set up and then co-founded in Nigeria and West Africa as well. We just offer solutions from security perspective to infrastructure that covers cloud as well, and all of new innovations and technology that's coming up. So enough about me, right? So I mean, we can share this slide with you guys to have all these details. So as I said, I'm going to be talking in two parts, right? And those two parts, first one is we will be looking at Azure Cloud Security Governance, right? What are the pieces? What are the building blocks? What are those components that make up Azure Cloud Security Governance? At a layman perspective, if I put a workload on Azure, what are the things I need to be worried about or to be concerned about, right? We know that Microsoft has a couple of things in place to ensure your workloads are protected, right? But there are a couple of things that are your responsibility as the customer hosting resources on Azure, right? So those are things that we want to call out, and then structuring that in a way for scalability, in a way for you to be able to expand, and in a way for you to be able to control, right, what you have on Azure infrastructure. And then we're going to take it down. How do we validate the controls, right, within the governance structure? I mean, you've got about Azure policy and all that, which of course inbuilt within Microsoft services that you can leverage on. But beyond that, there are a couple of other tools that Microsoft use in-house. Microsoft Cloud Engineering guys use in-house. And I've worked a couple of times with those guys, right? So they use them in-house to validate some of the platform. Even at the back end, they used to validate Azure as well, right? So we're going to talk about challenges of governance, the shared responsibility model that we all know that apply to all cloud, not just Microsoft, right? We look at what does the framework looks like, right? What are the building blocks and components of the framework? And then we look at the foundation guide, right, for the governance. What are the things you should pay attention? I'm not going to draw, dwell so much, right, because of time, right, in each of those components, right? But we'll try as much as possible to sort of bring out what the meats, right, of the old discussion. And then we're going to look at how do you establish guardrails within your governance in terms of control. And then we look at, enterprise guardrails, right, from components perspective. And then if you're going to be doing, a cloud governance program, what should those components and the piece look like generally, right? So those are things that I'm just going to look at shortly. And then we'll do a short demo, right? On an AZSK, validating your subscriptions and all those kind of things, basically. Hopefully that time can be able to permit us on that. So let's look at Azure governance overview. So what are the key things? You can see some of the customer control challenges that we have, right? I mean, from IAM perspective, SDLC, right? Software development lifecycle perspective. I mean, he just mentioned DevOps right now. And of course, right now, shifting to the left, there has to be DevSecOps, right? So a lot of concerns, organization in terms of data storage, managing your data, whatever the data is stored, excuse me, whether on SQL, right? Or you have that on Synapse or data warehouse, or, processing the data within the data factory. The data has to be protected in one way or the other. That's a concern to most organizations. And then securing your EAS infrastructure, your VMs, right? And you have about a lot of organizations using, Azure, security extensions, puppets, all of secure configuration tools just to ensure that the VMs are well baked and well controlled. And those are concerns as well to organization. Now, all of this, attackers can leverage on all of them. Unauthorized control, new user party coming on platform, data and access model, business change. When business changes, a couple of things need to change, whatever resource they're hosting on cloud as well, right? Compliance issue as well, come on board. I mean, organization before now, and I mean, the last 7 years, PCI DSS has been strong for bank, financial industry, right? And of course, all that's also EPA for health-related, organization as well. So all these compliance are key concerns that we drive a need for you to have a cloud governance in place, right? And then, rapid DevOps, we just talked about right now. You want agility, right? You want to get your product to the market. You want to develop the modules. You want to ensure as you're developing the module, you are testing them. As you're developing them in the configuration, in continuous integration, you are testing them also in continuous delivery, right? And you want to ensure that everything is well secure before they go into dev, QA, staging, or prod, right? So it becomes a key concern as well. So all of these, as I mentioned right now, these are challenges that want to make you ensure you get it right, have it, a secured cloud governance in place to make sure that you have visibility into what is where, so that your both and not is well, in place. So I've talked about shared responsibility model. Yes, Microsoft is responsible for a lot of things. They provide you the platform, right? It's a public cloud, but at the same time, there are a couple of things that you are responsible for, right? And that's what we call the shared responsibility model. So security in the cloud, definitely, right, is your responsibility. But security of that cloud, of course, and all that. But I just wanted to bring it up to you to let you know the need why you need to have security governance is because there are some things that you are responsible for, even though Microsoft have their own responsibility as well. Hence, shared responsibility model. Okay, I'm not going to spend more time on that. Yeah, quickly. Now, looking at the governance control framework. Now, this control framework, of course, I won't spend time to talk about this, right? But definitely, as I said, we can make a request for this deck, and our team, we can share this with you. Now, looking at the governance control framework, if you look at the input by the left hand of my screen, you see that there are industry standards that your governance framework must reference. Why? Because every organization has used those industry standards over and over again, and they become a standard that the industry consider leading practice, right? So ISO 27 NIST, cybersecurity framework, CSA control metrics, right, and more, right? These are leading practices, right, that's been considered, and you need to identify what is your own leading practice you want to follow, right? It could be NIST, right? It could be PCI DSS, depending on your industry. But you must pick your industry standard you want to follow. Then you must establish leading practices that you want to have. And this doesn't have anything to do with Azure. It has to do with your enterprise in terms of standard operating procedure, process, tooling, and all that, right? And then we look at what the Microsoft security best practice talk about. Now remember, Microsoft has what we call Azure Security Benchmark version 2.0 right now, right? And you want to ensure that all your resources on Azure, they follow that security standard. And nice enough, Azure Security Center, which has become from Azure Defender now to Microsoft Cloud, Defender, right, provide you, baseline security from Azure Security Benchmark version 2.0 perspective. But that's not for the discussion today, right? And then so all these are leading practices that feed in, right, into this governance framework. So what is the business value, right? From growth, operational efficiency, risk management, regulatory compliance. Now you peg that into Azure governance itself.
Larry, there's something. Hello, Larry,
Can
can you hear me? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, we can hear you now. Perfect, we can hear you now.
Oh, so you've not had me all this while?
No, it was just immediately it occurred. I came online, so
Okay,
you're
thank
good.
you.
Yeah,
Okay, but I'm clear now, right? Audible now, right?
super audible. You're clear.
Oh, thank you. Good. So we're talking about Azure Cloud Cyber Risk Governance, right? And I said, how do you operate your cloud right now, right? You have a lot of manual process in place, or do you have, automated process in place, right? Do you document your ARM template? Do you leverage your public ARM template? Do you develop your ARM template? Do you put your infrastructure as code in a repository and you deploy them via a pipeline, right? So what is the operating model like, right? And then strategy and the roadmap. What maturity level are you right now? Okay. Because every organization will move from one, level of strategy in terms of governance to another. Gone are the days that you're just going to create resources that the business is requiring. You create the VM immediately. It has changed right now. All right. You need to have a structured approach on how you provision resources on cloud. And then policy and standards. I mean, we know Azure policy, Azure blueprint, right? You can deploy the entire infrastructure and still keep them, right, as a source code in some sort of way. And then reference architecture. I mean, landing zones. Do you have your reference architecture that you reference, or you created new one? How does your landing zones look like? All those are part of the cyber risk governance component. Now, risk compliance reporting, resource manager model, Those are part of the ARM template I talked about before. And then blueprint and policy, I talk about that. Then management group and subscription guardrails. I'm going to talk about that later on. And then automation, basically. Now, if you look at the down part, the cloud cyber risk domains, this is the domain that sort of controls that sort of states the controls building blocks across identity and access, right? Cloud data protection, application and pass, cloud vigilance, cloud resilience, network and infrastructure. So if you look at identity and access, of course, talking about AD, right? Either from B2C or B2B perspective, right? We're talking about role-based access control. We're talking about privileged access management. If you're on ADP2, for instance, you can enable PIM, right, to control, privileges, users with privileges, and then ensure that you can be able to do access review for their privilege, right? MFA, conditional access, control the location where people are logging in from, domain services and GPO. That means if you're having, ADDS, right? You set up your domain, domain controller on cloud, and then you can, synchronize that with AD Connect to on-prem, right? So all those pieces are in place. Now, these are all technical controls, but this diagram depicts how does the technical controls connect with what the business and how the governance sits in the middle. So the governance look at what the business is saying, and then look at how we can effect this control on Azure Cloud. I'll say that again. The Azure Cloud Cyber Risk Governance sits in the middle between the business, right, and the cloud architects. Listen to the business, look at how that pegging and how the cloud architects can actually effect that control on Azure Cloud. That is very important. That's what is all diagram. So how would this be benefit to you? If your organization hosts you run stuff on Azure, right? You have workloads on Azure. Go back using this kind of diagram and ask yourself this question, right? Do we have a governance in place? Yes or no? Yes. If we do, how much of control, right, do we have right now within that governance, right? From ES infrastructure and PaaS infrastructure as well, right? Sometimes this applies also to SaaS, right? So this diagram is very important. I mean, a couple of implementation I've done, right? And when I'm saying implementation, technical implementation, this comes in sometimes as well, right? So sort of know what controls are missing and which one do we need to put in place, either from network infrastructure, from VMs, or from the services on Azure, right? Or from third-party marketplace services that's been implemented on Azure, right? All those things comes in place as well quickly, right? So I'm not going to dwell much on this. Basically, right, you need to have a foundational guide. And talk about landing zone before, right? Across the subscription and resource groups, how does the scaffold core looks like, right? Azure wants you to possibly, if you have a management group in place, you have tenants, you have resource groups, right? Now, those resource groups, who have access at the subscription level, who have access at the management group? How does the inheritance of access pass through, right? How do you give access across, right? Then automation and ARM templates. Deployments of your automation and implement. Where are those ARM templates? What do you leverage on for those ARM templates, right? Then tagging and nomenclature of your resources, basically. Do you tag for resources, identification, or for costing? All those things comes into place. And this is what is coming from Azure directly. So you want to see what that looks like from scaffold of Azure, right? Then your RBAC, your security center, of course, I mentioned right now, that's Microsoft Cloud, Defender, and then resource locking. Now, just to explain to you, these are the foundation of what Azure offers. But that does not mean that your governance must be based only on this. But I always tell people, move from the known to the unknown. This is the known from Azure. You now need to move from this to what is unknown, right? That's why I need to show you this, right? I'm not going to talk through this. Just going to show you. Possibly, if you have access to this, to the deck, you can be able to go through this, right? The same thing, right? From subscription perspective, so you can structure. I mean, when I talk about structure, subscription can be by department, can be by accounts, right? But can be by operation in your organization. And within that, we can have resource groups, right? And then when you have resource groups, of course, resources will be within resource groups, but there are a couple of things that you need to establish. And if you look at under here, recommendation, right, for subscription governance, RBAC permission to achieve principle of least privilege. Of course, you all know least privilege means that give people the privileges required for them to do their work, right? If you're a security person and your work is meant to read to know what is going on, I'm not going to give you a right permission right? That's what we call least privilege. So RBAC must establish that either from built-in roles or from custom roles, right? Provide robust network and data security while assuming isolation of production environment. What that means is dev, staging, right? Or QA and prod must be all separated, right? And then reduce security blast radius in the event of unexpected incident. Hey, reduce the private endpoints. If you have lots of public endpoints, right? And you have private endpoints, and those private endpoints, perhaps you're accessing them through firewall, right? But access to them is still coming through public in some sort of way. Hey, you need to be careful about that, right? How do you actually tag on the Azure firewall? Are you the access? Is it going through site to site or point to site, right? Or is it going through express route, right? All those, sort of discussion. They're not discussion for here, but I'm just mentioning them, right? So all of these are part of the recommendation for subscription governance, right? And the last one is proficient management of Azure resources, right? Leveraging macro level controls. And I talked about least privilege earlier on. Ensure that the controls you give at the subscription level, right, are those controls for either the owners or individuals that need to have access at the subscription level. But that's powerful. All accesses, leverage them, limit them to resource group level, or if possible, have security groups where you have all the users and you can assign permission to those users, right? Or have your PIN create roles, assign those roles to users, and then you can now go ahead and assign those to resources. Hey, you just need to ensure that you have governance and control at the subscription level as well, right? Okay, moving on. So what are those guardrails we're talking about, the controls? Yeah, the controls could be preventive, detective, or corrective, right? And most of the things I talk about right now, you can see them under there. Governance structure should be in place. Assessment of the current risk to the platform. And I will show you that right now, right? How you can actually assess what missing controls in my subscription, what missing control in a resource groups, right? And how to, sort of know how to fix those issues. Then establish policy, procedure, and standard, develop baseline configuration, right? And I talked about baseline configuration earlier on, right? Hey, if you're following CIS, right? Or if you're following any of the, maybe CSA, any of the, cloud security standard to baseline your resources. You've heard about golden image, right? So for your VMs, whether Linux or Windows, how do you bake in golden image and ensure that they are well hardened from security perspective, right? And then establish baseline for continuous monitoring, ensure that, hey, even though you baked security into those services and those workloads, you want to ensure continuous visibility over them. And then establish controls of corrective and reactive capabilities. But hey, take note, what I showed you in that framework, the down part of that framework.
Hi, Larry. Yeah. It's been a wonderful session with you. The session is not ended yet, but we only have 5 more minutes. And okay. we have a question from one of our viewers. That's why I quickly jumped in. So the viewer is saying that what determines the industry standard to use?
Yeah, so what determines industry standard is 2 things, right? And the first one is you have to know what industry you are, right? If your industry has a regulation, that could determine the industry standard you use. If you're not in a particular industry, then you can establish the ones that we're known for cloud. For workload like VMs, you leverage on CIS, right? For the entire cloud, you can leverage on CSA 3.1 control metrics, right? So those are the things that determine that. Okay, so as I said, we can share this slide with you, have a couple of other things to discuss on this, but just this part, right, quickly before I go. Now you have controls in place, as I show you on that framework, but you need to validate those controls, right? Now, just quickly, can you all see my screen? I'm on a PowerShell screen. Can you see that? So, can you all see my screen, the PowerShell screen? I want to be sure. Can we see the screen?
Yes, we can see the screen. The screen is visible.
So take for instance, I want to validate now, right? I want to validate a subscription, or I want to know, when I say validate, what I mean is what are the controls that are missing and what are the controls that are in place, right? Just for the quick of this, and I've already spun this report out, but I'm going to run this right now. So if you look at this right now, basically, I just have variables stored within, to create the environment variables within this, right? And I can go ahead and validate a resource group, for instance. So this is resource group, right? So I can validate resource group. So you can look at it. This is the variable get easy security status, and subscription ID and the resource group name, variable name that I stored, right? And I can run this. Now, this will tell me the controls that are missing in my workload. I need to do it for all the services on Azure, right? So it will be checking in for each of the services. It will tell me which configuration is missing. And the good thing about it is I can script this to let me know the controls that are missing. How should I fix them? It will generate PowerShell script for me to be able to fix those controls. So if take, for instance, if a particular network or VNet is not well configured, I can know from this directly. So we use this to validate your security governance, what controls are missing from the framework that I showed you earlier on, and we can determine each of those controls and how we can fix them. Now, what is running on screen right now, after it is done, it's going to generate a PowerShell for me, right? And it will show me, right, each of the resources, what is missing, and how I can actually recommend, to give me a recommendation and how I can remediate them. You can see this, right? And it will do it for resource group, subscription, and tenant. And Microsoft right now, they are moving this right now to become tenant service, right? They call it is a TS, right? And I mean, it just makes the work easier. And this tool is being used as well by Microsoft Cloud Engineering team internally to validate Azure from the back end. All right. And so at every point in time, I can use this manually, or I can use automation accounts to set this up so that I can have continuous monitoring on Azure. So this is running, right, team? So I'm going to be handing here. Definitely, as I said, we can share the deck with you. This is something interesting, and I think this deck as well can get you started in ensuring that you have good Azure governance in place. All right, three takeaways, right, I'm going to mention is, first thing, the organization must understand the workload that they have on cloud. The second one is, what are the business imperatives in terms of strategy, right? The third one is the framework and control, and how do you validate those control to ensure that there's no drift and the organization is secured from workload perspective. All right, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much for everything that you said. I'm sure that our viewers have learned one or two things from your session. And trust me, this is not just going to go down like this. I'm going to add you on my LinkedIn, because what you said is eye-opening. And guys, if you would like to get in touch with our speaker, his name is Lanre Macaulay, and he's on LinkedIn. Just search for him, his name will pop up. Thank you very much. We hope to have you again, Mr. Lanre.
Sure. Always available.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye for now. Bye for now.
Right. Thanks.
So, viewers, we are glad that we're glad to have you for our first session, and we're excited for the next session will be coming up in 10 minutes. So we hope that you will stay with us and we hope that you will stay with us and get to learn about DevSecOps on Azure Pipeline with one and only Paul Oyemakinwa. So see you at 4:20. Bye for now, guys. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, wherever you're watching us from. And I'm so excited. If this is your first time of joining the event, West African Bootcamp 2021, MCT West African Bootcamp 2021, you're welcome. So we have a lot of stuff for you. Just sit back. And we have a lot of amazing prizes for you to win. So what I need you to do is for you to make sure that you fill the evaluation form that will be placed on the screen during the sessions and at the end of each session. We had a very wonderful time with Mr. Larry McCauley. He's one of us. He's always available. If you have any issues, you want to reach out, you can reach out to him on LinkedIn. But the next session we have a very amazing guest, Mr. Paul Oyemakinwa. He's a very good friend. Everything I'm doing today was because of him. He added me to the group and introduced me to all this. So I'll be passing the baton to him so that he'll talk to us about Azure DevOps. Good afternoon, Mr. Paul. Good to see you again.
Good afternoon, Raphael. Hi.
Yes. So I'll be leaving the baton to you. You're going to be telling us all the exciting thing that we want to know about Azure DevOps.
Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you are hearing me from. I believe you can hear me, Raphael.
Yes. Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Oh, okay, cool. So I will be sharing my screen now. So let me know when you can see my screen.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
It's not okay. Okay.
Is it
Yes,
showing
you're
now?
good. You're good. You're good. Your screen is up. So,
Okay.
so
Just a minute.
I'll leave this session to you.
Just a minute
Okay.
for you here. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be watching me from. Today, we'll be talking about an interesting section or interesting topic that says talked about implementing DevSecOps in Azure pipelines. Just a little introduction about myself. My name is Paul Oyemakinwa, and I'm a technical delivery manager at Rugby, the cloud platform, and also the cloud solution architect. Been able to work on different projects in different sectors, different organizations, including private and public organizations. And also, I'm a Microsoft MVP on Azure platform, and then a Microsoft MCT also. And with other team members, with some other of my colleagues also forming the Azure Nigeria user group. I'm a lead, one of the leads in the Azure Nigeria user group, and that is my Twitter's account and my LinkedIn account. So just a little bit about DevSecOps. So it's more like an history. So just going to walk you through an history how we get to the DevSecOps. Now, in an enterprise environment, there are three department or three teams that is important in area of application building. One is the development team, the other is the infrastructure team, and the other team is the security team. Now, the way it flows before is you have an infrastructure teams that build a test environment, for the application team, whereby the application teams develops all of the applications before the security team begins to look for vulnerabilities or begin to look for, some credential scanning on the applications that they are built. But over time, we've discovered that the time for the applications or the software to get to production takes a lot of time. So, which introduces us into into DevOps. So, which is a form of a framework, that has a union of the people, the process, and the technology, coming together in be able to have a continuous integration and a continuous deployment. So in the area of planning, the tracking, the monitoring, the building, the testing of the environment, everything happens in a flow. But the problem about that is, you have this kind of a team, like 100, you could have in an environment, you could have 100 developers, you can have a 10 operational guys, and you have possibly one or two security guy, which brings a major challenge because the development team going to DevOps, they possibly want to be pushing releases possibly every day or pushes releases every possibly 5 times in a day, which becomes a problem for the security team. And the reason is because, most times for security team, they have these huge line guides, in PDFs or in docs, that have all the security policies. And you imagining a developer, sending or trying to do a release like every day, it's going to become a major problem, for the security team. Which brings the question that, okay, why is the security team left out? Why can't security also be automated, much like the development and the operations can be developed? So, which brings about DevSecOps. Now, for us to have a DevSecOps, these 5 things is very, very important. I'm just going to talk a little bit about them because of time. So one is, for a proper DevSecOps operation, you need to have a clear communication pathway between the development team, the infrastructure team, and the security team. Because with that clear communication path, you have an understanding of what the application is going to do. You have an understanding of what you should be looking out for, when all of this application is being built. Also, you need to begin to think about having your security as a code. Now, when I talk about security as a code here, apart from you having some other solutions that you could use, like whiteboard source, like files, some other solutions, or SonarQube that you could use, there is also compliance as a code. Because in area of security also, you need to look at compliance also. So in area of compliance, you can begin to look at bringing in some form of an Azure policies in or Azure blueprints into the system. And with that, you are even going towards achieving a continuous assurance, in your environment. And for DevSecOps also, you need to train. You need to properly train yourself, in the use of DevSecOps, and you need to integrate security in DevSecOps. Now, in all of this, it needs to be automated, because if you can automate your DevOps, then it means you should be able to automate um, your your security. I don't know if you can still see my screen. Can you?
Yes, we can see your screen. Your screen is clear.
Oh, okay. So you can still do automation of your security. Now, and which means there's going to be patterns, because if for you to achieve all of these things, there's definitely going to be a kind of a pattern. Now, looking at infrastructure, I'm going to talk a little bit about infrastructure and the application. Now, when you're deploying or doing a kind of a DevSecOps in an organization, you need to plan your infrastructure wisely. And one of the things you need to do is you need to give a subscription per environment. Now, in a typical enterprise environment, you will have a dev environment, you have a staging, possibly you have a QA environment, then possibly you have a production environment. Now, you need to have each subscriptions in each of these environments. Then you need to allocate or possibly have a policies or have a security policies being used in each of the environment. The other ones is you want to apply policy, to control transparency and proactively. You can apply policies based on cost control. You can apply policies, based on what should be deployed. That is where it comes with the compliance, because it's more around you doing a compliance as a code. And also, out of the box, Microsoft Azure provides Security Center, which you can deploy from the very start date. You can have your security center on, from the very start day. And you begin to think about infrastructure as a code, because infrastructure as a code these days, you need to have them in your environment for repetitive actions. So gone are the days, you just go to the portal to do next, and then with that, you've discovered that there are a lot of inconsistencies that happens, with the click buttons that we do on our portal. So to have a proper arrangement or a proper scan or a proper view of the environment, you need to possibly build them with an infrastructure as a code. And for your production environment, so when you have your CI/CD pipeline, it is good that in your production environment, you place them in a CI/CD pipeline. And you want also make security the heart, of your CI/CD pipeline. So in area of applications, what do you check? What are some things that you need to check, in area of security? Now, one of them is the vulnerabilities. So these days and age, a lot of developers use lots of open source libraries. Now, the open source libraries that you use, there could be some kind of vulnerabilities, in these open source libraries. So you need to also check. There should be software or something you use, to check for vulnerabilities of the open source libraries you're using. The other is you need to look at this library if they are allowed. There are some libraries that they are not allowed to be used. Some is because they need to be used for an enterprise application and not to be used for a basic, which also could be a part, for licensing, because some application or operate open source, you need to have licenses for that even before you could use those libraries. And also you need to look at some open source versions if they are not outdated, because if they are outdated, there might not be support, for some of those open source versions. And also you want to check the CVs, the common vulnerability and exposures of your applications that you write. I'm going to show a little demo of some of these things, if time permits. You could do to check possibly in identity, to check what are some common vulnerabilities in the area of identity. You're trying to build a Kubernetes, an orchestration service like Kubernetes, for instance. You might check, some vulnerabilities, in those areas. Now, talking about management group. Now, in area of accounts, you could have different subscriptions and you place them in different environments, say production environment and pre-production environment. And you can have a management group, at the top or at the very top of the hierarchy, to do a management of this subscriptions or multiple subscriptions that you have. Now, the management group, that you have, you can place a policies on this management group. So any policies you place on this management group, can be controlled or can take effect, on any of these environments. So the policies there, it's in inheritance. So which means you can have a policy applied in the management group and it applies to your production environment and to your pre-production environment. And in area of Azure governance also, you could have a blueprint, and the blueprint could be a combination of your policy definition, your RBACs, and your ARM templates. Having all of them together, you could deploy them as a portal or a CLI, or you could use some REST APIs, for you to deploy the blueprints. And when you deploy them, you can use that to do a governance, of your environment, to know which policies am I applying. Do I want to use a PCI DSS policies, for this environment? You might want to build another environment, and you begin to look at the RBAC, whether you want to give a control or user control to a certain person that should be a contributor, to a certain person that should be a reader. So all of this, you can do all of it in your Azure governance. Now, talking about security. Now, you will discover that security is always applied, yes, in DevOps pipelines. most times it's applied between the testing environment and the production. Now, as a security person, possibly after you have your DevOps pipeline created, you will always see them, during the test environment to the production environment. They try to do some vulnerability checks if the environment is okay. But the problem about that is, it can take longer hours, for them to detect, because at that point, it's either is in production or is in pre-production. So which brings back the technology we see, which is a shifting security left, whereby instead of applying your security between your testing environment and your production environment, you can actually apply your security at the beginning. At the beginning, when you are writing your codes, you can begin to check for some of these security vulnerabilities, or do a kind of a code scanning, in your codes. Now, looking at the deliveries, these are some of the stages, for a solution. You have a pre-commit, whereby you have you writing your codes using VS Code or any of the IDE solutions, and you can have your build phase, your release phases before going to production, and you can do your operations, whereby you can do your monitoring and those other stuff. And these are some common solutions that you could use, or some very common solutions that you use. I won't go through all of this because of time, but there are some that I wanted to pinpoint in this list. One of them is the threat modeling. So in the pre-commit, when you're writing your codes, you can do some kind of a threat modeling. So what do I mean by threat modeling? You can try to find a way to break your code, or try to find a way to ask somebody to try to misuse your code. With that, you're beginning to see if there are vulnerabilities, in your codes. Another one is you could use a static code analysis, in your build phase, whereby it checks for some very common, common vulnerabilities. The very common one that you see in these instances will be for credential scanning. Most times when we write our codes, when we write in our database, or when using some templates, or in our application, we begin to put some codes, some passwords, in our code. So doing a static code analysis, you can do a scan of the environment and can give some highlights of if you have hard-coded credentials even in your codes. I'm going to do a little demo about that, possibly after this presentation. And then you have, for acceptance, you could use Terraforms, you could use ARM templates and all other things. And in production, you could do a pen test. Pen test is a continuous action, and it could take 2 months, 3 months, to properly, do a pen test of your production environment. Then you can know, if there are some vulnerabilities, even when the environment is in production. And for operations, during the time, you can do a continuous monitoring. You can use different solutions like Azure Security Centers and other things. And the blameless motem, I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. So there are instances that the environment are being attacked. The environment sometimes could be attacked, and begin to see the security team, or in the team, throwing blames at who has blame, for these attacks. So in this blameless postmortem, what is referring to is to mitigate the vulnerability or mitigate the risk. At the same time, you need to take lessons, out of what happens, instead of going around doing some blame games. So this is a typical flow of a development, in an environment. So you see a developer uses a VS Code, as an IDE or other IDE solutions, and it pushes to a dev, depending on the branching model strategy the developer is using, from the dev to the CI build to the CD pipelines and to the Azure dev subscription. So if everything works well in the dev subscription, then you can push the code to the master, then it goes through the same flow to the CI, to the dev, then to the QA and staging subscription, which also, after going through some other checks, you can push them to the production subscription also. So in this flow, there are some solutions that can help you at every phase of this production. You can begin to see some tools that you can use. Now, in the pre-commit phase, which I like to call it, there are some solutions that you can use, like dev scheme. I just realized that newly started using that tool, the dev scheme, and it's a very, very interesting tool. So when you are writing your code, for instance, it could be .NET or Python, for instance, it begin to check within your code if there are vulnerabilities and begin to give you warnings, to tell you possibly this is the vulnerabilities that you have in your code, even right when you are writing it in your codes. Then in the build phase, other solutions you could use the AZSK, which is a kind of an ARM checker. You can be writing an ARM templates. It begins to check within your ARM templates to see if there are some vulnerabilities, or some misconfigurations, in your ARM templates. And you have a white source both, as a solution for open source vulnerability solutions also. And in the monitoring phase, there are other solutions you could use out of the box from Azure, like Azure Monitor, Azure Management, Azure Policies, and Security Center. So for the DevOps on Azure, this is a typical DevSecOps framework or architecture on Azure. So you have an Active Directory that the developer is using to authenticate against GitHub. So GitHub has mostly been, for most of us, the source of truth in area of source control. Then in GitHub also there are some advanced security so that tools or settings that you can do in GitHub, which I'm going to quickly do after this section, a demo of it. Then you push to pipelines before going to the container registry and before pushing to Kubernetes services. And you could also use like Azure policies or key vaults, for
Sorry,
management. Yeah.
sorry to cut you short. We have about 7 minutes left. And
Okay.
quickly before we continue, there's one of our users. He asked a question. He said, "What are the policy considerations for Azure Blueprint with regards to African workplaces?" So maybe
Okay.
you want to answer that.
Yeah, so in area of blueprint for African environment, so there are some, it depends on the organization. So for instance, if the organization is a financial system or financial organization, there are some PCI, DSS policies that, that you could set, in those areas. In the policies, I could quickly show that after possibly this, you could have a PCI DSS framework that you could have on Azure policies that can guide, you as a banker. But if in terms of let's say the GDPR, I'm going to say NDPR, for instance, which is possibly Nigeria, uh, and data privacy regulations, in that you can have a list of it, then you can develop a custom policies, for that. Now, currently we don't have an NDPR policy, on the policy, out of the box, but you can develop it, as a custom policy. So I'm just going to quickly move to the demo because of time. Um, so I'm just going to quickly show you about the advanced security settings for GitHub. So like I said, most times GitHub has become one of the most common source controls that we use. And GitHub has also provided a kind of an advanced security settings that before you could use an open source environment. Most of us go to GitHub to get some open source solutions and we just modify, then we use. So GitHub has provided a means whereby before you use them, you can check the vulnerabilities of this open source that you wanted to possibly fork to your system or you want to clone, right? So one of a typical example is OSWAP Juice Shop. So it's a insecure web application. It's just to show you how this works. So this you can fork it into your repo, which I've done. So you can fork it into your repo. I'm just going to quickly go to my repo now. So which I've forked to my repo, so I don't need to do that again. So after that, when you have that, then you can do a security check of the code you wanted to fork or clone to your system. So this is a typical way of how it works. So you have Azure policies, which you can set, advisories, dependent bot alerts that you can always have also. But the most important one I wanted to show is this code scanning alert. So I can go to this code scanning alert and I can check. So this code, I want to use it. I want to possibly clone it to my system and modify, use it. But I begin to see here that there are some vulnerabilities in the code. You can also check the severity, whether it's high. You wanted to check if for medium, for low. You can check all if you want. Then you can have all of this. Even you can see what are some of the items that is involved in this. And the beautiful thing about this also is it provides you with the common vulnerability numbers also, which you can also check from this platform also. So the other one I wanted to show some common tools that you can use. When you go to the marketplace.visualstudios.com, check for security. There are a lot of security tools here that you can use, in your environment. But the one I wanted to talk about, because of time, is a static code analysis, and the name of the tool is Checkov. So Checkov is a tool that most people uses. It's a little bit common these days, for checking codes, especially for most of us that write Terraform templates. So if you write Terraform templates, you want to check, your code itself, if it is not vulnerable, So in the Checkov build here, you could see there are a lot of advances, a lot of codes with the code numbers and names. So for VMs, these are some recommendations also you could use with Checkov. So just going to show you the one that I have here. So this is a storage blob, just a common storage blob that we all know, and writing in Terraform templates, from my main TF. So I have all of this, and I can build my Checkov scan. So I build a Checkov scan to scan through my storage blob to see if there are any dependencies, or there are any issues, based on best practices on this blob that I have here. So this was written, and you have it on containerized, which is the Checkov. So when I ran this in my DevOps pipeline, this I'm just going to show us the results. So this is a typical of what you will get. So I have this, then I'm going to show this. I hope this. Okay, so this is one I ran, I think, like an hour ago. Just going to show you the result of it. So this is a job that failed. And why does it fail? So I ran a static code analysis, but look at it here. So it tells me here that in this code here, sorry, in this code here, I have this failed because there are some recommendations. So this storage blob I have is not supporting my security account, is not adhering to the naming rules, it's not ensuring my storage account is disallow public access. So with this, you can begin to check all of this and make corrections in your codes. So all of this, you can have them, use them. These are some very common tools that you can use. And then the last one I wanted to talk about is some checklist. So for application development, I don't know if you can see this well, but these are some very common SWOT checklists that can guide you, when developing your website or when developing your infrastructure. So you have some cloud security top 10 and some what's it called, the security DevOps tool chain. These are some tools that you can use. Some of them which I've talked about in the pre-commit phase, the commit phase, the acceptance phase, the production, and the operation phase. So going back to my slide. So what are some of the things you can do? A summary of it is, when you are developing for your DevSecOps, it's good to have a security, a subscription, per environment, apply your policies, and you can enable your security center. So these are some resources that can guide you also. You can look more into them also. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And thank you. So I don't know if I have questions. Hello? So I don't know if there are questions for me. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the some resources that you can use. Then I'm going to possibly take questions also. So there are some very common tools that you can use, like I said earlier, from this list. Very common ones you could use, like the dev scheme, very common that you could use in your code, to check for vulnerabilities. And when you go to the common vulnerability and exposure, you have something like this with a keyword. So the keyword, you could think of anything. So let's say you wanted to check what are the vulnerabilities in identity. So you can submit it. It's going to give you a list of some results. Then you can check this result possibly for some security some vulnerabilities, that you can have in area of security. You can even possibly type Azure, and then you can begin to look at, okay, what are some vulnerabilities, let's say in Azure parts, in Azure infrastructure, and all of that. So in Azure sphere, I see there's a vulnerability in temporary vulnerabilities. So these are some things that you can also, get, for the Azure dev also.
Sapal, thank you
Yeah,
so much for your amazing session. I'm sure
yeah.
that I'm sure that a lot of us here have picked one or two things and we're going to run away with it. We are grateful for the time you spent with us today.
Hello, hello.
We hope not invite you Okay, I'm up now. My internet was a little bit shaky, but I'm
Okay.
up now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So,
Okay. Mhm.
viewers, no one else has any other question to ask Paul. In the light of this, we would like to thank Sir Paul for the amazing session. We hope to see you in the next session. Thank you, Sir Paul.
Thank you very much, Raphael, for having me.
Bye.
Yeah,
Bye for
bye.
now.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to have a very wonderful guest for our next session. His name is Mr. Tiago Costa. But before we proceed, I'd like to say thank you to our I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors and our and all of you that have spent your time to that you've invested your time to stay with us this day for the final track of Azure or West African Bootcamp 2021. So I'll quickly, because time is fast spent, I'll quickly bring our speaker on so that he tell us a thing or two about Azure governance. So he's a senior cloud architect and advisor. He focuses on Microsoft Azure. He has paid his dues. He knows his he knows his like we say in Nigeria, he knows his onions like the back of his hand. Welcome, Mr. Tiago.
Hi,
Good
everyone.
afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you.
So I'll remove myself from the screen and leave the show to you.
Okay, awesome. So I think you can see my screen. There you go. Exactly that the view that I wanted. Okay, so welcome everyone. It is really a huge pleasure to be here today and to be able to speak to everyone on the African community. Yes, and we are going to talk about um, why the lack of Azure governance is a little bit disturbing in my point of view for some companies. So, but before we even start, I always like to start my presentations with something here. And today I bring you this. If having coffee in the morning, okay, this just doesn't wake you up, doesn't work for you anymore, try to delete a production resource group on Azure, because if this doesn't wake you up, I honestly just don't know what will wake you up, to be totally honest. Okay. And yes, this already happened to a customer of mine. And this should not happen, period. Okay. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about here today, the in terms of governance, that if you have proper governance, this kind of things should not happen, because well, that person should never have gotten the permissions to do what he did. But doing a short presentation about myself, my name is Tiago. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. I'm also an Azure MVP. And I've been working as a cloud architect for Azure and advisor. So that means I help companies moving workloads to Azure, and I help them building cloud native solutions on Azure. And more lately, I've been focusing a lot of my work on the governance space in order to help them have an Azure infrastructure that is reliable, it is secure, but also we have some rules. It's not the Wild West like we usually say. And that will also add up security, it will add up manageability, and in the end, it will end up that you can run your workloads in a cheaper way. So that's kind of the goal with all of this. Some more things: I'm a member of the Certification Council. I'm a MCT regional lead, and I've been working with Azure since life ever. I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal. Not today. Today I'm in Germany. As you see, this is not my office. This is a an hotel room where I am. I'm in Dusseldorf. It's going to be a conference here the next 3 days, and I'm one of the leading speakers here. And so I'm traveling. We can also basically, I have like a goal, which is visit 100 countries, and I'm still 23 countries that I'm still missing. Some of them in Africa. So when all this is a little bit more controlled, this COVID pandemic, I'm sure I will add up like probably like 12 as on the top of my head that I want to travel to. I have been only in Angola, Mozambique, and Cape Verde. So those are the only three that I have visited. I didn't visit any of the others, and there's so much to see. Okay, but let's talk about today. So we're going to talk about what is the cloud today, Azure subscriptions, management groups, policies, our back cost management, and the idea is also to do this with loads of demos. Okay, so cloud today, the cloud today is complex. Period. There's no saying to that. You run hundreds, thousands, millions of workloads. We don't have only Azure. Customers use sometimes a multi-cloud environment, so they use more than one cloud. For example, Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, and Azure or cloud is not just for that workload, for that business unit, that department on the company. No, it's across all BUs, it's across all the projects, it's across the whole company. And when we talk about cloud management capabilities, those are the 5 key areas that we have. Security. So how should we secure our environments to protect, like backups, disaster recovery? We also need to think about monitoring. We need to think about log analytics, getting the logs, getting the metrics, so that I know what is happening in my infrastructure in Azure. And then we talk about configuration management, update management, so all of that stuff that we need to know. And we also need to think about govern. And so it is also important to talk about policy management. Okay, it's important to talk about cost. Okay, cost management. And those are the things that I bring you here today. This is what we're going to talk about today. So, talking about governance, okay, for the cloud. We're going to talk about policy-based management. So assess, enforce enterprise-wide governance across your company. We're going to talk about cost management. Then we talk about resource visibility, which is, sometimes it's not easy to find our resources. And it's not easy, to find the relationships that exists on the resources. Like there's a web app here, there's a VM over there, and then we have like a SQL database. How do they connect? Is that SQL database being used by what other Azure resources? We need to know this, because if you change something on that database, you need to know where and in which resources you're going to impact. And then we talk about subscription governance. We need to understand that we're not going to create a subscription just because, someone asks, I want a subscription. So we need to know why we're going to give them a subscription and things like that. So talking about cloud governance, this is my approach. First, we need to document our governance approach. And with this, I'm saying, look, we need to give them and create kind of a document, where we can, with that document that we have, we need to understand naming conventions. We need to understand what can we do in terms of what resources can we use, how can we use them, and all of that. So I have a customer that we are not using Databricks, so there is no governance on Azure Databricks. It's even not allowed to use Azure Databricks. But then eventually, the customer did some R&D about it, and they said, yeah, we're going to use Databricks. We want to. So they said, hey, we need to do the governance on this. So now we're doing that. And what we're doing is we're doing meetings with the security team, deployments, the DevOps teams to understand what will be the processes of govern Databricks. And then we're going to document all of that. And then when someone wants to use Databricks, they will just have everything done for them. There's going to be Bicep, ARM, Terraform templates, and everything will be just, done in kind of just like the guidelines on how to use that service. And we do this for every single service that we use. We also talk about Azure policies. Okay, what Azure policies are we going to apply that have to do with this resource? Okay. And then the last bullet point that I have here, but it's quite an important one, talks about incident response plans. So we need to think about that, what kind okay, of response plans I will have for a possible incident that might happen with in my organization. So with this, I mean, imagine, look, there is a problem. This workload is just not working anymore. Okay, what's the plan? How should we tackle that? Because for sure we need to do something about it. Okay, so you need to have careful with that. So that's the kind of stuff that we want to do. But well, let's talk about subscriptions. And even before we talk about subscriptions, let's talk about an Azure region. And when we talk about an Azure region, we talk, oh, it's a set of data centers that are deployed within a perimeter. And yes, we have several regions across the world, and I have here a slide with exactly that. And as you can see, the United States is very well covered, Europe is very well covered, Asia, my own opinion, should be better covered. And then there is something that is horrible covered, which is Africa. Okay, we clearly need more regions over there, and I guess that is something that there are, at least from the top of my head, like, I don't know, like 3 countries that for sure they should have their own regions at least. um, but Azure is growing every single day, so I'm sure they will bring it on. When we say, let's just talk about South Africa there, west and north. So when we do those two, we know that South Africa north, for example, is not one data center; it's way more than one data center. But they are always in one thing, is that when we say a region, we say all the data centers are in the same country. And that's important when we talk about data residency concerns, because when we talk about that, we're going to talk about, oh, there's a legal requirement from the government saying that the data needs to reside within the country. Sure, but they don't never say anything about cloud or not cloud. They just say within the country borders. And if all the data centers are in that country, well, we can fulfill that. So that's something that we can do. Then we have tons of regions around the world, like you saw it. And there is one thing, which is the service availability depends on the region. So what do I want to say with this? Well, what I want to say with that is that we are going to have regions, okay, that don't have all the services, or sometimes the service is there but not all the SKUs, so the sizes. That happens a lot, okay, with Azure, with Azure Virtual Machines, okay. So Azure Virtual Machines is deployed in every single Azure region, but it's not deployed in all the sizes in every single region. So there are regions that they just don't have the sizes, okay. Talking about an Azure subscription, is a logical unit for the resources. So we create resource groups. Those resource groups will exist inside an Azure subscription. The same Azure account, which is an Azure AD account, like a user account from Azure AD, can then connect. And as you can see, for example, in here, I have those 3, okay, subscriptions here. And this same Azure account that I have here can reach, okay, this subscription can reach this subscription, can reach this subscription. And then you can have permissions to do things or just to read. That depends. It will depend a lot on the permissions that we gave, but we can do that. Then it is normal, because of many reasons, for companies to have, especially large companies, to have tons of different Azure subscriptions. Even before, because an Azure subscription, it's an easy, as you can see here, it's an easy subscription bound. The subscription is a security or billing boundary. So it's a very easy one. And because of that, yeah, we're going to have tons of subscriptions. So we need to find a way to govern those subscriptions a little bit better. And before we go to talk about management groups, I can just show you, this is my demo environment. And if I scroll down on the Azure portal and I go to subscriptions, you can see This is my demo company, AZ Contoso, and I have here 2 subscriptions for Corp. I have the dev and I have production. I have the Canada, Germany, Netherlands, Portugal, Singapore, UK, US, you get the idea. So I have like one per country where we are so that the local IT can deploy some stuff. And I have this one here to try out stuff, to do some training, etc. This is my demo company. Now imagine in the reality, if you have like, usually Corp will have way more than just 2. Okay, sometimes we have a workload, one environment, that's one subscription. Okay, we can have one for a business unit and things like that. The country ones, I only have 1 here. But again, as you can imagine, yeah, it could be way more than just one. We need to find a way, to take care of this. So that's called management groups. And what management groups gives you a top level resource on top of the subscriptions. And then you can build this tree that you see over there. It doesn't need to be a balanced tree even. And then I can, for example, imagine just go to this, okay, here, this management group that I have here. And if I assign a policy at this scope or an RBAC at this scope, which like I will give permissions to contribute for user 1, that means that all the stuff that is under this will get those permissions. Okay, got it? So that's kind of the idea. So yeah, we need to do that because it's the only way that we can do what I say here, which is govern over subscriptions. And usually we create this as a logical representation of our organization. So let's just do here a demo with this. So going back to the Azure portal, if I search here for management groups, as you can see here, I already have some created in here. So you see this AZ Contoso root here. I have branches, and then I have here like, Asia, Europe, North America, South America. You just see how there are like some subscriptions in here. Imagine like, for example, now we're going to start in Africa. So one of the African countries we're going to start a business there. Oh, okay, great. So if we go to branches, so now I'm in the branch management group, and I click over there where it says create. If I do this, I'll just need to do here an ID. I'll just randomly put here something, and I'll just put here Africa. I'm not going to submit this, but if I submit this, I'm going to create a management group that is going to be a child of branches. So it's going to be under branches, which is, same thing as I have all those in here, Asia, Europe, North America, etc. And then I could just put there all the subscriptions for all the Africa countries that we have as branches, and we are good to go. Now, if I do access control, this is the RBAC part. If I do this at the branches, you need all the branches. People will get access to this. Like, let's just create your role assignment. This is the same thing as we do a role assignment for something else. I say contributor, next. And now I say, user and groups. I select here and I search here. There's like an account that I have, which is called AZ Training. There you go. This is it. If I just do this, I'm not going to do this, but if I just follow now, it's just review and assign and then assign. Basically, that user will have permission for all the stuff under that management group. Things that are there today, but also things that are going to be there tomorrow. So if tomorrow you add up another subscription to that management group, sure, this user will get permission to get there, okay? Another part that is pretty important when we talk about governance is kind of one of the core areas is Azure policies. And with Azure policies, look, I can create, assign, manage policies. I can run evaluations and check what are the resources that I have, that usually we have like thousands of them, that they are not compliant, okay? And then I can enforce compliance. I can just get a report. But I can also do one thing, which is there is an effect called deny in Azure policies that you don't even allow your cloud administrators to create things that go against the policy. So it's even really enforce compliance before compliance. Okay, it's not compliant. So, oh, it's not compliant, this resource. But if we say, no, I will just deny this, they cannot even create, okay, that resource because it goes against the policy. The policy doesn't let you create that. Examples, business examples of this. Allowed locations. It's very common in customers to have some legal requirement that doesn't allow us to create certain basically certain resources in certain locations. Let's imagine, let's give you a scenario, okay? In my demo environment, all the workloads created in the subscription AZ Contoso UK, they need to be within one of the UK regions. Let's imagine that scenario. So if we try to create here a resource, storage account, for example, just saying a storage account, but I could create something else. And I say that, look, you're going to be created in the AZ Contoso UK. And if I just give you a name to this, something like this, and I choose East US, you're already seeing that, look, no, I'm not going to let you create this because you're going against the policy. Okay, the value East US was denied. But if I get to this and I choose UK South, for example, you will see, yeah, this one here is allowed. So yeah, you see, this is the policy working. How do I build this? So several things. So we go to policies first here, policy. And then in policy, we need to talk about several things. The first is definitions. Okay, so when we click under definitions, we can see here there are hundreds, literally hundreds, of what we call built-in, okay, policies here. If I just say I just want policies, you see here built-in, and look, there are like tons of this. Okay, you can also build your own, and I have some here. There are mine. Okay, so they are custom ones because the ones that exist, okay, they are pretty nice, but they are too generic, and I really wanted something more specific. So I built, something. And it's very normal for you to be needing to build something there. And this is the definition. What I use for this, there is this definition, which is the built-in one. That what it says is this. This is the policy definition. Even if it's a built one, you can see the source code. And it just tells you like, oh, if your resource that you're creating in one of the locations that is under this parameter named list of allowed locations, I'll be good. If not, I'm not going to be good. So this is not being fulfilled. So the effect will be what? It will be a deny. Okay, so that will be the effect that we're going to do around this. So that's the stuff that we might don't want. Okay, that we might don't want to do. So this is exactly what I have. So if we go, if I go to policies and I go to assignments, you will see that I have here an assignment. Scroll down this. That's called Allowed Locations UK. That the scope is that subscription. And if we click, we can view here, okay, the parameters, list of allowed locations, and the two values that I have there. So they only have 2 regions from the UK. So, or you
Wow,
choose one of those, or
wow,
else.
Mr. Tiago, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
sure. Go ahead.
it's been a very interesting session. I'm afraid we only have 5 minutes left,
Yeah,
but
I know.
before we go off,
Mhm.
uh, there is a question that a user asked. They said, I believe it was when you were showing the maps with different regions. He
Okay.
said that what determines the creation of a region in a country?
Okay. So basically, what determines is the business on that country. Okay, basically, if there is no demand enough that justifies Microsoft to do the investment, they don't, and because they have to prioritize where the demand is, there are some very blank areas in that map that we can see, but it's basically based on demand. Okay, so if there is no demand, they are going to prioritize other regions that, yes, there is a huge demand on those regions. Okay, cool. So moving on here. So this is what I have here. So I have this here. Of course, look, I can do other policies. I can do this for allow resource types. So you can say, no, I will not allow those resource types. Virtual machines, look, the same thing. We have virtual machines that they have one core and like 2 gigs of RAM or something like that. Pretty small. And then we have other virtual machines that we're really talking about like hundreds, like 500 CPUs, 12, 16 terabytes of RAM. Some companies, they have authorization to create those. Now, my question is, do you really need? Who needs to create such big machines? And I'll tell you, almost no one. Even in a company that, yes, we need in the company to build that because we have Sapana here, but that's just for the SAP project. A regular web application will never use that. So the thing is, why do we allow our cloud engineers to have the possibility to create those very large VMs? We shouldn't. This will even save you money. Okay. Required tags. We need to tag, and I'm a huge fan of tags. We should tag everything. So yeah, make sure that everyone puts tags on everything, every single resource, and what tags do they need to put there. Enable Azure backup on virtual machines. So there are just some some examples that we have here. If we want to talk about, this is like my top 5. Enforced locations, allow VMs queues, block virtual machine management port so that people can't do NSGs on that. Enforce tags, and then the allowed services is that, look, if I don't use like Databricks, we don't use that. Let's just block it. No one can, so that we don't start to see popping up resources that we just don't manage. No one does, and then we have them there. Just a short thing on RBAC, role-based access control. The big idea of this is we have scopes that go from the management group to the subscription resource groups and the individual resources. And the idea is use this so that you can segregate the duties of your team. Sometimes we have network engineers. They just need to work in a scope. Okay. Just give them access to network stuff in that, okay, in that scope. So that's kind of the idea that I wanted to talk about our back. Okay. One last thing is about cost management. We all know this is, like, to be totally honest, I think we can do a session just on cost management. It's a super complex topic, and we have tons of customers complaining about that they are afraid of not controlling the costs with Azure. Sure, okay, but we can. There are a bunch of obvious tools, pricing calculator, Azure Migrate. There are like the obvious tools that when we talk about cost management, we talk about, but I just wanted to talk about a little bit different, which is we have different perspectives when it comes to cost. An IT executive or a financial team or a project team, they don't see costs in the same way. Project team, they just have their focus just on their project, and then that's it. Financing team, they just want to talk about, look, how much money do we need to have to pay this, when we need to pay this. It's just they are pretty picky in forecasting when we need to pay and how much we need to pay. And we all know, again, how hard that can be. An IT executive is more about, return on the investment and things like that. Resource tags is pretty useful. Just go for resource tags, tag everything, because then when we see cost visibility and we have like stuff like CSV files, or we have Power BI that we can connect to this, we can be pretty picky, with where the cost is coming from. So I'm a huge fan of that. Watch out for those, because that's like super massively important. And then we have something called
Hi, Mr.
the cost
Diego.
management tool. Yeah, let me just close. We have the cost management tool that is a super cool tool that we have on the Azure portal that can help you, and you can filter by tags. Like there's a tag called cost center. Okay, how much money did I pay for this cost center for that period of time, and things like that. So that's pretty cool. This is like the last slide. Okay, so I just wanted to thank everyone, and my name is Tiago, and this is how you can govern Azure. Okay.
Thank you so much for your wonderful session. You have really exposed us to why we should not be careless. Guys, I hope that you've enjoyed this session with Mr. Tiago. We hope to see you again, Mr. Tiago, next year, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll be here. If you guys just send me an email, invite me, I will submit some sessions, okay?
Thank you. Bye for now. Guys, don't forget to fill the evaluation form. So that we can hear your feedback about this session with Mr. Tiago. For now, goodbye.
Okay, bye. It was a pleasure.
So, guys, we thank you for the amazing time with us. Our next speaker, Miss Hamida Rebai, will be next, and after the break, we will we'll have a session. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to fill the evaluation form.
Louisa. Louisa.
Hello, good evening, everyone. We're glad to have you with us for the last second to the last episode of West African MCT West African Bootcamp 2021. Our next speaker is is a very vast person. She knows her work. She has paid her dues. She's a software architect. She's a blogger. She's she's a very interesting person, and I'm sure that you're all excited to hear what she has to say about developing solutions with Microsoft Azure. So I'm going to be bringing her on and leaving the stage to her. So, Miss Hamida,
Hello, hello.
good evening.
Good evening. Here is the morning, still
I
morning.
know,
I
I
am
know.
I'm recording from Canada, but I am Tunisian. I'm from Tunisia, so I'm from Africa
Awesome,
too. Okay.
awesome,
Happy to
awesome.
join
So,
you today. Thank you for the invitation.
same here. So we're excited to hear what you have to say about Microsoft Azure. So I'm leaving the stage to you, and I'm hoping that everyone here will learn a thing or two from you.
Thank you.
All right.
So today we will learn about developing solution for Microsoft Azure. I think that I get a beautiful introduction. So I am Microsoft MVP in developer technologies. I am software architect. I am a member and speaker in .NET Foundation. I'm also MCT 2 years and Azure certified. So you can follow me on my Medium blog, my LinkedIn, YouTube channel, or just follow me on Twitter if you have any questions. You can ask me on Twitter or in the end of this session. So our agenda today, we will see about digital transformation and business needs. We will see how we create Azure App Service web apps. So we'll prepare the environment for our demo to create it. We will talk about Azure Container Registry, and our demo it will be creating an Azure Container Registry, ACR, with the Azure portal, and we show how we can create it using Azure CLI too. We will talk about Azure Kubernetes Services. The demo is about create and deploy Kubernetes application on Azure Kubernetes Service. And in the end, we will have an overview about Azure Service Fabric. And maybe we will see how we can create, deploy a Service Fabric application to cluster in Azure. In a changing of market, one of the main challenges of maintaining the competitiveness of digital businesses remains IT agility. However, in their current states, computer systems are struggling to adapt to the latest technological developments such as mobility or the Internet of Things and to their new requirements. With a large number of interdependency of services linked to the life cycle of an IT project, each modification of source code of a classic monolithic application can destabilize it in maintenance. For these reasons, companies have resorted to more optimized scalable architecture, ensuring continuous availability and less costly in terms of research conception and in particular oriented microservices. This change is essential facing the aggressive competition and in particular that of startups which are not yet congested by rigid infrastructure. So this table summarizes the modern patterns and technologies to be used for implementing solutions deployed to any cloud provider. And about containers, there are many models, most of which are linked or comes from domain design driven. As you can see here, we talk about microservices. We have many patterns that we already know before talking about solution dedicated to cloud. We have API gateway, we have event bus, events, and they are all based on domain-driven design. We have CQRS simplified. We know CQRS before having a solution deployed to the cloud, domain events, and about technologies, we can find many technologies that we are ready to use it, like Docker containers. We talk here containers for Linux, for Windows, Docker image, for example, Docker registry, we will see it today, Azure Service Bus, orchestrator like Kubernetes, we talk about Azure Kubernetes services, and we have more and more technology that we are able to use it for any application. We will start by Azure App Service, Web Apps. Azure App Service not only adds the power of Microsoft Azure to your applications, such as security, load balancing, auto-scaling, and automated management, you can also take advantages of its DevOps capabilities, such as continuous deployments, GitHub, Docker Hub, and other source and packages, management staging environments, custom domain, and certificates. With app services, you pay for the Azure Compute Resource that you use. The compute resource you use is determined by the app service plan that you run your application on. And as you can see here, we are able to deploy any application in many languages like PHP, Ruby, Node.js, Java, not only C# or .NET Core. Now we will prepare our environment for running any application on Azure. So what we need here is to, for container, if you are using container, we need to install Docker Desktop in your machine. We will use today Visual Studio 2022 that already launched in the first week of November. We can also use 2019 for our demo today. You need to have Azure account, so you should be able to create all Azure services, and we will use a bash environment to launch Azure CLI command line, and we install the Microsoft Azure Service Fabric SDK we needed for Service Fabric. Now here we can see how we can create a web app using command line CLI. As you can see here, we will add name, web app name here. You can add any name here in your app, here just generated name. And we will use AZ group create. To create a new group, we should create select a location. For my case, it's Canada Center, but you have many locations. And you give a name, here my research group, for example. And to create our app service plan, we need to use AZ app service plan create. Here we give the same research group and the name of my application, already used before, and we will create our web app using AZ web app create. This is the keyword that we use it, create. We give a name of our application, we define the research group, and we define the plan. And if you want to start a GitHub URL here, our application, so we have GitHub repo, we define our depot, we deploy code from the public URL by using the master branch to the web app created area, and we print out the fully qualified domain name by using string concatenation and the web app name variable, as you can see here. Now our first demo is to create Azure App Service web apps. So I will open here Azure, Microsoft Azure. We will select create research. Here we have web app. We click on create. Now we will use the user portal. Before we just show you how you can use Azure CLI to create a web app. Here is user interface. It's easier to use it. Here we select our subscription. We can create a research group here, or we just select the research group. I will select MCT West research group, and we can give a name here. You can give any name here. For example, we can say MCT West app demo. So here we can publish as a code, or we can select Docker container if you want to deploy a containerized application. We just select code. It's the same thing. Here we have a container. Here only we will deploy simple application. We will select the runtime stack here, so we can find the last version of .NET 6 here. We can select operating system. Any application, ASP.NET Core, can be deployed on Windows environment, even on Linux. I will keep Windows for this case. And we can select the region here. I will keep Central US, for example, but we can have more other. So I will select, for example, Canada Central. And here we have the our plan that we already before created using Azure CLI, but here we just use that we have, or we can create our plan before. Here we can click for create. If you need to create another one, I will keep this one. Sorry. And we have here the SKU and the size. We can change the size by clicking here. And we have really many plans that we can select it for production. We have many plans. It depends from the memory, the processor, depends from our needs. We have the dev test that you can use it for free. So we have three, D1, B1, but it's not used for production. It's only for testing a web app. We keep this one, and we click apply, and we click on review and create. You can have more information here on deployment, monitoring, tags, but they are not mandatory. They are optional. So it depends from your application. And when we click here on create, the creation of a web app can take few seconds here. Now we go back to our presentation. And we will talk now about Azure Container Registry. So what's Container Registry? It's an Azure service that you can use it to create your private Docker registries. We can use Docker Hub to create and deploy public registry, and Docker Hub we can deploy a private Docker registry. But for this service, we only can create and deploy private Docker registries. So it's similar, as I said, to Docker Hub, but it offers a few unique benefits. Container registry run in Azure, and container registry is highly scalable, providing enhanced throughput for Docker pools that can span many nodes concurrently. So we use container registry here. We will create a registry by using either the Azure portal or the Azure CLI, and we can store and host images and build images. Now we will create an Azure Container Registry with using the Azure portal. I recorded a video to be able to go faster here in this demo. So here we will open Visual Studio 2022 and we will create a new project. We click there. We will select ASP.NET Core Web Apps. We click on Next. We give a name to our project. So CR demo here. And we click on Next. Now I will check Enable Docker here. We can select Linux, but we need to have Docker Desktop already installed in your machine. As you can see here, we have Docker already installed, or if we click on Enable Docker, we are not able to create our application. We select the latest version of .NET framework, that is .NET 6, and here we have our application already created. So it takes a few seconds, but here we go faster because I recorded this. We click on Publish on the application. Here we will publish our application to Azure using Visual Studio. We click on Next. We can select Docker Container Registry. We can click a folder, FTP, FTPS, or import the file. So in our case, we will select Azure. As you can see, we have many options. And here we will select Azure Container Registries. Here we click here. If we don't already have Azure Container Registry already created in Azure portal, you can use Visual Studio to create it. As you can see, we define a name, we select the subscription, we select this resource group, we can create it. And here we select the region. As you can see, we click on Create. And after creating the research, our service in Azure, we click on Finish here. It's already created. We can push our application. We click on Publish, and we will push this application to our Azure Container Registry. So it's really simple, interactive. Let's say it's really interactive and simple using Visual Studio 2022, and you can find the same option in 2019 too. So here, as you can see, is pushing our application. We will go to research group. I will check MCT here, and we will find our Azure Container Registry that we already created using Visual Studio. Now we will see how we can create it in Azure portal. And so we select create new research. We click on containers, and we have container registry here. And we define our subscription. We can select or create a new research group. We give a name. We select the location, and we select the SKU, and we click on Review and Create here. Now we go back to our presentation to see more Azure services. So as we said before here, to create an Azure Container Registry using Azure portal, it's really simple, but we can also use Azure CLI, and this is our command line that we can use it. So we have AZ, SCR, create, we define the research group, we give a name, and we select the SKU. That's here, for example, basic. We have standard, premium. It depends from your needs and your application. And we add this admin enabled to true to be able to add administration privilege. Now we will see an orchestrator that we can use, that is Kubernetes, and the service that we have in Azure is Azure Kubernetes Services. Azure Kubernetes Services simplifies deploying a managed Kubernetes cluster in Azure by offloading the operational overhead to Azure. As a hosted Kubernetes service, Azure handles critical tasks like health monitoring and maintenance. Since Kubernetes masters are managed by Azure, you only manage and maintain the agent nodes. Thus, AKS is free. You only pay for the agent nodes within your cluster, not for the masters. We will start here to see how we can create Azure Kubernetes Service cluster using Azure CLI. We will use AZ, always the same word key, but here we have AKS, the same word, create. We define the research group. We can create it before using Azure CLI. It's really simple. We give a name here. We need to define the number of nodes used. Here we said 1, but we can have more, and it depends from your application. the architecture of your application. And here we will generate SSH key. We use it here to have our privilege. And if you use Linux environment here, we need to generate this one. It's mandatory to add it. And here we give the name of our container. Now to create and deploy Kubernetes application, it's really simple. We will go to Azure, Microsoft Azure. We click on create or research. We go always to container here. And we find the Kubernetes service here. We click on create. Here we can select our subscription. We select or create a new research group. It's really important to select your cluster details. Here we have standard. It depends from your application and from your budget, because it changes from a plan to another. We give a name to our cluster. We select the region here. We have here availability zone. The availability zone is a high availability. It offers you really high availability that allow you to spread the nodes in this node pool across multiple physical locations, protecting your application from data center failure. So we can select 1, 2, 3, or only one, for example, here in our case. But we recommend to select more than one here to have the high availability. We have here the Kubernetes version. We have some version, stable version on a preview. You can select the version that you want, use it, that your application is used to. And we can click after on review and create our Kubernetes cluster. Now the next step here after creating our application, the next step is to open Cloud Shell, my dashboard, and we in Microsoft Azure, and to connect to our cluster as below here. So if we already created our cluster, we just check connect here. We click on connect to have our information needed to connect to our cluster. After we use AZ, account set, subscription, you define your subscription. You can find this information in connect here. After we add AZ, AKS get credentials, we select the research group, and we give a name to our we give a name of our cluster here. And we can find, as I said before, this command when you open your Azure portal and your cluster. Next, to be able to deploy our Azure Kubernetes Service cluster and run any application using the Azure CLI, for example, the previous application, we create an empty file called Azure Demo Deployment YAML. This is file we needed to deploy our application. We copy this content to the empty file created. This is the content. It's basic content. You can find more content in Azure Samples in GitHub, and use this simple really simple. So we define here the deployments. We give a name to our deployments. We use one replica. We have here our container that we use it. So we need to have Azure Container Registry to use it here in Azure Kubernetes Services. So here we have the pods, our application, and we have the image. It's the image that we already created, for example, before, or an image that you needed to be orchestrated by Azure Kubernetes Service. And then the next step is to run the application and deploy it in the cluster using the kubectl apply command, and we specify the name of our YAML manifest in this way. So we have the kubectl apply Azure demo deployment. This is the file that we already created before with the previous content, this one. And we will use kubectl get deployment to verify if the deployment was created or not. When the application runs, a Kubernetes service exposes the application front-end to the internet, and this process can take few minutes to complete. So we will use kubectl get service command with watch arguments to be able to see our UI, user interface application. If you have user interface, service is used for user interface. But it's if you have only backend application, we don't need to use this one. Only we check your deployments. And kubectl get service demo Kubernetes deployment watch is the command line that we can use it to see our service. Now we will see the service fabric. So service fabric allows you to create and manage scalable and reliable applications composed of microservices. These distributed microservices run at very high density on a shared pool of virtual machines which correspond to a cluster. Service Fabric represents the next generation platform for building and managing these cloud-level Tier 1 enterprise application running in containers and works with other providers such as AWS and OpenStack. So
Hello.
we'll
Sorry to cut you short. We only
Yes.
have 5 more minutes for this
Okay.
session.
Okay, thank you. It's the end. Thank you for remember me. So here we can see that some component related to Service Fabric, like the cluster structure. The Service Fabric's cluster is a network connected set of virtual machines into which your microservices are deployed and managed, and the nodes are the virtual machine that belongs to the Service Fabric cluster. And here we just see how we can create and deploy a Service Fabric application to a cluster. Just a simple way. I will show you how we can create a Service Fabric using Visual Studio. Here we create to create just to find Fabric here. And we just select Service Fabric application. We click on next. Here we give a name. And if we click on create, we can find many options, many applications that we can create. We can create a container, Event.NET Framework. And we need to show, I will show you just how we can deploy this one. We will not create because we don't have really time, but I will show you how we can use it here. We go back to our application. When we install SDK, we have Service Fabric Cluster Manager that you can use it to manage your application. So we just click Manage Local Cluster, you deploy your application, and we can find our application deployed in this cluster, local cluster, and we can deploy in Service Fabric in Azure the same way as before. So we click New Research, Service Fabric, and we use Visual Studio to deploy this application as Service Fabric. As you can see, we click on Manage, and if you have any questions here,
There are no questions.
okay.
There are no questions.
Okay. So you can ask me on Twitter or by email. You can reach me by LinkedIn. So if you have any questions, I know we have a lot of information today. We present many Azure services.
Yes, you talked about so many things. You talked about
Yes.
Service Fabric, Kubernetes, and it's
Containers.
Yes. And the good thing about this is the video is going to be available after the session. So
Yes.
I'm sure that viewers will be able to view and refresh, and see what you're really talking about. So we are very glad to have you. We hope that the next any event that we'll have again, when we invite you, you would honor our invitation, because personally, as a DevOps engineer, I've enjoyed your session so very well.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, that's the end of the session for Miss Hamida Rebai,
Thank you.
and thank you and bye for now.
Yes. Bye. Have a nice day. Nice evening.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be having the next session. The next session is going to be hosted by our speaker, Mr. Imo Etuk. He has paid his dues. He knows his left from his right, and he's going to be teaching us how to develop. Just hold on a minute. He's going to be teaching us how to build Azure DevOps CI pipelines with ASP.NET. I'm not going to be playing the usual break music because that's going to take 10 minutes. Our time is fast spent, so we'll be jumping right into the next session. I hope you guys don't mind. So, Mr. Imo, you're welcome. You're welcome. We're not taking break because our time is fast spent, and we want to go right straight into the next session. So I
Yes,
hope
yes, yes.
you.
That's fine. That's fine. That's
Okay.
fine. Can you get my voice? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well and loud and
Okay,
clear.
okay, okay. Yeah. You are good to go. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon to you all, wherever you're joining us from. So today, I'm going to be taking you through the simple step on how you can set up a simple CI pipeline, continuous assessment and integration pipeline on Azure DevOps. So quickly, without much wasting of our time, Raphael has already done the great introduction of myself, but I'm going to say a little about what I do as an individual. So first, let me put it to slide. So we have a slide there. Let me get the layout that is better. So my name once again is Imo Etuk, and what I do basically is a cloud engineering stuff and technology consultant, and as well as MCT. So, and at my leisure time, when I do not have anything doing, I actually write author some technical articles on a Tech Direct Archive, which is right there on the screen. And also my Twitter handle is there and the LinkedIn page, so you can feel free to follow me. So we'll jump quickly into the business of today, which is I'm going to take you through the how to build Azure DevOps CI pipelines using ASP.NET application. That's going to give us a little in-depth into what DevOps is all about and how you can take make a kind of a build application with DevOps and get it run for you. So quickly, let me get to my. Okay, just a minute, please. Let me get my. Sorry, I'm going to end this presentation and start my this thing again. So before we while my this thing is coming up, before we go ahead, we are going to just look at what DevOps is all about. This section is centered on Microsoft Azure DevOps. So, but before then, we get to understand what is DevOps itself. How did they come about the word DevOps, and how has it been adopted by organizations around the world, and what can they do to also improve it? So that's what most we are going to look at today, and that is going to be an awesome section for everyone to at least take one or two things home at the end of this presentation. So we are going to get started right away, and also, so the topic is right there on the screen, and we are getting started immediately. And let me move on to the next slide now. So we have first of all, the agenda for today is we're going to take a quick peep into into the history of DevOps. How did it come about, the word DevOps? Then we will look at it briefly, because my co-speaker has already spoken a lot. Mr. Paul has already done justice to DevOps as we all watch his section. So we're going to look at the traditional IT versus the DevOps era. Then we're going to also look briefly into DevOps best practices. Then we get started with Azure DevOps. Then we will go into our demo workflow briefly. So that will take us to the next slide now. And the next slide is a quick peep into what DevOps is all about. How did they come about this DevOps and the thing? And I can remember from the screen there is telling us that from in times past, as this guy called Patrick Devos actually coined what the word DevOps in 2009, and who DevOps Patrick Devos actually became one of the most knowledgeable person and skilled in DevOps. Then the term was formed is a combination of two words, development and operations, which provide a starting point for understanding exactly what people typically mean by when they say DevOps. So notably, DevOps isn't a process. We all know that DevOps is a process, but DevOps is not a process or a standard. We know that many devotees of DevOps today refer to it as a culture, and that's a viewpoint that New Relic favors. And we also use the term DevOps movement when talking about DevOps, about topics such as adoption rate and trends for the future and DevOps environment. So to refer to an IT organization that has adopted a DevOps culture. So that's what the DevOps is all about. So we move quickly to the next slide, which is about so the next screen is what is DevOps itself. So without much ado, I can see that Paul has already done justice to this. So I'm going to quickly play around and get you started with it. So we have DevOps as a union of people, a union of people, processes, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to end users. When we talk about continuous delivery is simply a kind of extension of what we are going to talk about today, which is continuous integration. When you, first of all, finish the stage of continuous integration, which is the early stage that enables you to kind of detect bug in your code processes before deploying your application into the production process. So that's what continuous integration do. It checks bugs at the early stage before your application will be deployed into the production stage. Then the continuous delivery is the extension of that stage, that whereby you have the opportunity to integrate your code and check if there's any bugs that you can correct before it gets let. So we are going to also get to know about what, and then people are those who are actually carrying out this. And we have people, the developers, the testing, the QA team, and those who are and the operation team. Those are the key three people that are there. And the processes are the stages that these processes are going through. These people are carrying out. Are they going the testing, the dev stage, the staging stage, then the production stage, and in between the QA person cut across, because he or she needs to check for bugs at the early stage and all that. So we also have we are going to quickly move into DevOps versus traditional IT. We all know that in time past before now, and a kind of we had a kind of a siloed way of delivering software, and which actually slowed down the software development processes and takes time for you to shift your product to the customer and to the market, and which delays business processes. So now we all see from the screen that development operation attempts were siloed then, and nobody really, that is, the system wasn't freely communicated. There was no free communication between the people involved. People, it takes time to communicate and pass information. Then we can see that in a DevOps driven world, we have that development teams are no longer siloed, that everything is flows accordingly. Feedback is delayed, but in terms of modern DevOps world, the feedback is not delayed. So we have it fast, and everything is get done within seconds. And if you want to, people shipping code now through the modern DevOps, it takes them maybe 2 to 3 days, seconds, the code, the product will come out and become useful to the end users. So we have the operation team wasn't able to cope with the frequent changes because everything was manually done. Now changes flows through all development stages instantly. Bug can take weeks. You see, from the traditional way, it normally take a kind of months, years before you can fix a single line of problems or kind of bugs or kind of that can arise in the process of trying to deploy your application. So we see that from in the DevOps way, we have that continuously monitored and validated operation quality. Everything is constantly monitored through stages. There's no room for kind of there's a mistake and we are not able to fix the bugs on time. So developers usually do not have access to production servers when it comes to traditional IT before now. Production servers were kind of reserved for those and that stage, but code deployment is aggressively done in the sense that repetition is allowed in terms of this modern day DevOps. Then there's a delay. In fact, before now there was a delayed development cycle, and we always talk about that. And now it takes shorter development cycle and faster in innovation to get everything done. So we move down to the next slide. We talk about DevOps best practices. So we have now before you can make it in DevOps, now you have to remove the barriers. DevOps is about you removing those barriers that were there and all that. So for you to be able to succeed, you must transitioning to DevOps require a change in culture and mindset. It's no longer a one man thing whereby this one will not. You have to open up, break the barriers that were there, and be able to break the silos that exist between the dev team and the operation teams. So that is what that is all about. There must be right strategy in place, or well tailored to the business. The strategy that you adopt for your DevOps, the organization must be tailored towards the business processes so that it will not go a kind of one way and maybe be against the business process. It must probably align, and the both program managers must align teams in a shared environment that they will go to achieve a common goal at the end of the day. Then you should plan to bring in containerized, kind of containerizing your application. We just learn about Kubernetes orchestration, the kind of using the Docker to break down the application process so that everything will be faster. And this makes now when you containerize your applications, it makes your apps easily executable and lightweight. Like we have infrastructure automation tools like Kubernetes, Ansible, Chef, CI/CD CD tools like Jenkins and all that. Then this is what you need to also adopt there. And by integrating those one there, then also to make more tests and align QA with dev. Now, people thought maybe QA should come in at the production stage. No, in terms of when you want to achieve a lot of achieve success in your code process, in your software development process, you need to include QA at every stage. Most importantly, it has to work with the dev team in particular to fix bugs, to discover if there's anything that could stand against the software at the production stage. Then they will just resolve that. Then after that, you monitor your application. That is when it gets to the continuous deployment and you deploy it to your customer, who are the end users of this application. Then what you do there is continuously monitoring and to ensure performance of this application. So this will take us into the stages in DevOps. When we talk about DevOps, we just spoke about how the QA will cut across the stages. So we have the dev, staging, and the prod. Then the dev is right away when you are deploying this application in your computer or in your environment. It could be the GitHub. In fact, everything is done on your own computer before pushing into a version control like GitHub and all that. So this environment on your computer, here is where you will actually do all your code updates and everything, and before committing everything to the GitHub repository and those of your coworkers as well. So the staging stage is kind of similar to the production environment in the sense that you have all the code on the server in this stage instead of a local machine. By this at the staging stage, you must have pushed your code into the GitHub repository, and that code will no longer stay in your local machine again anymore. So it's a kind of close to the production stage. So immediately after that one, you have the production stage. Every time you talk about making your project live, this is the environment you are talking about. In fact, when you want to, if the end users are not using your product, it comes as a result because you've gotten to the production stage. So we have the production environment to be where users access the final code. After all the updates and testing of all the environment, this is one of the most important steps. And without getting to the production environment, you know how your application, your software development process can be completed. So that's that for now. If you have any question, please feel free to drop it and let me attend to them. So we move on to the next stage, to the next slide. So we move on to getting started with Azure DevOps without wasting of time because our time is already fast spent. So quickly, briefly know what exactly is Azure DevOps. And from what I have here on my screen, Azure DevOps is a software as a service platform from Microsoft that provides an end-to-end DevOps toolchain for developing and deploying software. Azure DevOps can as well be used to it's integrate with most leading tools on the market today that we have, and it's a great option for orchestrating on DevOps toolchain. There have been a lot of organizations who have found Azure DevOps fits for their needs, irrespective of their language, platform or cloud. Azure DevOps can be adopted by any organization, and it has also been adopted already. So there's no organization today that will want to use Azure DevOps as a private Git repository that cannot find it useful. Azure DevOps provides the kind of developer services for support teams to plan, work, and collaborate on code development and also build and deploy application as well. Azure DevOps support a culture and set of processes. So it's not like it's not just the way you use other platform as maybe your code process is used to go with the version control, GitHub, and all that. Azure DevOps provide you with all those services. You can as well adopt Azure DevOps as well. So we'll look at some of the services that Azure DevOps has. You can see from the screen that we have Azure bots, we have Azure repos, Azure pipelines, and Azure test plan, and Azure artifacts. Then these services are very, very good and are useful to your projects. We have Azure DevOps that is where all the agile planning, work item, and all the tracking, visualization of and reporting of anything concerning your project is being done. So you can carry out everything there. So we have Azure repos is like when you have a GitHub, just the way you host your code on GitHub, that you can as well host your code on Azure using Azure repository. That's it provide a cloud-hosted private Git repos as well for you and your business. So we have Azure Pipeline, a language platform, and cloud-agnostic CI/CD platform, where with support for containers and Kubernetes. You can as well, like we are doing today, we are going to be running after creating our local code in the local machine. We're going to be using Azure Pipelines to run it and then test it and see. The Azure test plan is where you provide an integrated plan and a kind of explanatory testing solution. Where you test all the things that you need to test. Azure Artifacts provide you with integration packages. You can use it to deploy any language that you need to deploy, and you can deploy Python application build in Python language, Maven and npm NuGet package, and feed from the public private sources. So we move on to the next slide, and that next slide is about designing an authorization strategy. Before you can get access to Azure DevOps, you need to also get you need to get this you need to get a kind of there are kind of authorization that you need to do by getting it ready for people to access. You need to have a Azure DevOps services use either a Microsoft account or Azure Active Directory to protect and secure your data. There's no way you can do without having to pass through that. For non-Microsoft tools like Git, NuGet, and Xcode, you can use personal access token. If you want to integrate your code from, maybe your code is being hosted somewhere in GitHub, you can use create a part on your GitHub profile and link it up with the Azure DevOps. Then push your code from there to Azure DevOps repo. Azure DevOps is also pre-configured with default security groups and permissions. All the security that you need to make your code processes a success is already configured there. So we have you can also configure app access policies and conditional access policies. Maybe if you are deploying your code and to the Azure portal, if you are using an app service plan, to be able to link up all those applications, you need to configure some conditional access policies to know who has access to this application or not. So we also move on to the component of Azure DevOps. We already spoke about that, which has to do with the when we talk about Azure DevOps, a kind of component of Azure DevOps, we have what they call Azure DevOps organization, which we are going to look through it during our demo section as well, how to create it and how to set it up. And we also have Azure DevOps project. Azure DevOps project is it helps in simplifying the setup of an entire continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline to Azure with Azure DevOps. So we have that. Azure DevOps project provides a repository for source code. When you deploy your code from your local machine, pushing it, what will enable it to be pushed to Azure DevOps is actually the project. You need to have the project, Azure DevOps project in place for you to be able to do that. So we have this other one now. We have a Azure DevOps a project to represent a kind of fundamental container where data is stored on Azure DevOps. So when all the project that you create, all the code that you create will be shipped through the Azure DevOps project and all that. So we move on to the next slide, which what do we get with free Azure DevOps account organization? So we have like 5 users are permitted to have basic access to it, and unlimited Visual Studio subscribers and stakeholders. A free monthly amount of additional services such as build and deployment. So these are what you start to get when you are setting up your Azure organization for free for the first time. Then if you want to do more, you can pay for extra stuff. So we have a prerequisite for creating an Azure DevOps organization. Then here you have to read and understand how to plan your organization structure. Everything, there is no specific rule. It depends on, it is flexible based on your organizational needs. You cannot say because my organization is using this kind of stuff, it must work for you. No, you have to set it according to your organization. So set up an Azure AD. This Azure AD is used for authentication and all that, and also control the security processes, ensuring that security best practices is in place to your organization on Azure DevOps. So without Azure DevOps Azure AD, they are solely responsible for controlling the organizational process. Then we have the organization name must start with a letter or number, followed by letters, numbers, or havings. So it must be very unique, not just ordinary name like that. It must be unique according and should be related to your business, something like that. So we have a prerequisite for creating Azure DevOps project. Just as we also have prerequisite for creating Azure organization, you must also understand that you have to. There are some criteria, prerequisites you need to meet for you to be able to set up Azure DevOps project as well. First of all, you need an organization, which we spoke about. You must create an organization first before project. So you must also be a member of the project collection. What they create a project, when we get to the demo section, you see that there are two options to create a project. We have the public and the private. And I'm going to choose a private. It is only those that I will invite to that project that can have access to it. Administrators group or have they create new project permission to set to allow. Now, when the administrators group are creating this project, they must kind of set the create new project permission to allow. Otherwise, they will not allow somebody who was not previously a member of the project team to do anything with the project. So, like in this our case today, we are going to be building a CI/CD pipeline and with from a simple static web code of ASP.NET core, and project will be initiated within my local system. Then the building Azure CI/CD pipeline is not only limited to ASP.NET Core. You can as well also build it from a Docker image or any other language with your code being hosted remotely on GitHub. So it's not only you can as well have your code hosted already on GitHub and then use the personal access token that, like we talked about earlier, and authenticate the flow process to your GitHub, to your Azure DevOps. So we have steps to creating Azure DevOps organization. So this is what we're going to do in the demo workflow. But in the meantime, just take a look at the screen and understand how it works. First of all, you need to sign into dev.azure, then select new organization. We are going to do this in the demo workflow. So quickly, we move down to creating Azure DevOps project. When you are creating Azure DevOps project, you have to select your desired Azure DevOps organization to open the project creation page. First of all, if you have up to 5 organizations under your own Azure DevOps portal, you have to select one that you want that owns a particular project. And then you select the new project and enter information into the form. These ones are going to come in during the workflow demo section. So we talked about this is the center for today presentation. We have this CI/CD pipeline, and what does it entail and all that. So we now get to know that CI/CD pipeline is a method to frequently deliver apps to customers by introducing automation into the stages of app development. So that when we're comparing the traditional IT and DevOps, we see that the traditional IT was not automatic. In fact, there was no automation process. Everything was manually done and all that. So for you to be able to create Azure CI pipeline, what you need to do is to have an Azure subscription. You must have Azure subscription in place, and you can get one through the link provided here on the slide, azure.microsoft.com/, then free. And after setting up your subscription, visit the Azure DevOps portal to create your first Azure DevOps organization. You must create Azure DevOps project as well. Then or either have access to a code to GitHub or external Git repository that contain either an app built with .NET, Java, PHP, or Node.js. It could be Python or static code. So we have Azure. We there for that to know. So you see that as CI/CD pipeline is a series of steps. That step that must be performed in order to deliver a new version of software. When you go through the dev stage, the staging stage, to the prod, and the QA team are cutting across all these things. But most importantly, they have impact at the dev stage because that's where they check the bug at the early stage. Then another one is that the Azure CI pipeline works with just about any language. You can use any, you can deploy, you can build your pipeline from any language. Today, our center is going to be on ASP.NET. So we have Azure Azure DevOps pipeline combines the kind of continuous integration and continuous delivery to test and build your code and push it to another level in the software development lifecycle. So that's what Azure DevOps Azure pipeline can do for you. So we have the step to create Azure DevOps organization will be demonstrated in the demo section, like I said before. So we move on to the next screen. Do you have any question, Mr. Raib? Is there any question for me? Mr. Raib, is there any question for me?
No, Imo, thank you very much for your wonderful insights. At the moment, there is no question. I just posted on the chat window that if any of the viewers have questions, they should write, but
Okay.
no one has written anything yet. By the way,
Okay.
we have just 4 minutes left.
Oh, okay. I have to be really fast. Okay, so we moved on down to so that we can meet up with our time. So we have the continuous integration testing, and this in this stage, when you are testing, when you are running your continuous integration, you need to carry out testing as well. This is where the test is focused on and executed during the CI process. There are four stages here actually. We have the source stage, we have the build stage, and test stage, and deploy stage. Because of our time, I will not really delve much into that. But if you need any clarification, you can reach out to me based on my information provided earlier. So we'll go into the demo process, how we can quickly deploy a simple ASP.NET app from my local system and all that. So we move down there, and so we have the screen on, and what we do now is to quickly go to quickly launch the quickly launch the this interest the quickly launch to our browser. I believe you can all see my screen again. Okay. So first of all, we'll go here to our browser and visit dev.azure.com. And before then, while that is loading, I'll quickly create a folder on my desktop because of our time. I will not wait for one stage to finish. So we get to have this, I'll call it MCT West Africa Cloud Bootcamp 2021. So we have we have our this in there already. So inside this folder, I'm going to quickly launch the CMD into the command prompt interface. So let's check if the that's not giving me. So I'll open it again. That will take us to, that will give us the CMD interface. So the next thing we'll do is to quickly run this short follow the demo workflow is on the screen, and how we are going to, okay, it's not done. So we have this .NET new MVC app code to run. Okay. Okay, I'm going to run it from this other screen. So while that is being carried out, let's quickly look at how we can create the Azure DevOps. It has opened here. So once this interface open, we have to sign into Azure DevOps environment. So I'm going to sign in there now. We have a project already here, and I'm going to create a new organization just to demonstrate to you how to do that. Though we don't have much time, but let's just see what we can do within the short time we have.
Hello, Imo. Your time is up, but I'll give you 2 minutes so that you can run through that
Yes. So we
that
have
demo
a
that you're giving.
so we have this. I'm going to create this organization to be MCT West Africa Bootcamp 2021 here, and select any Central US here. Enter the code. So our organization is being created. Minute it will come up. So we have this. The project name should be MCT demo, MCT West Africa demo. So we have our project to be run on the private as private. So I'll move on now. It's still okay, still loading. Well, that's the so we have a so we have this. This has finally okay. Let's create the project now. While the project is being created, let us check if our code will run now because
I'm sorry, Imo. Your time is up.
okay, my time is up.
Yes,
The time is
please.
really
I think I've given you
the time is really
extra.
really wow.
I've given you more than extra time.
Did
We
you give
didn't
me
do
extra time?
we didn't go for break, remember? We did not go for break. And also you have extra. So yeah.
What my is there any time again left for me? Do I have any time left?
Uh
Raphael?
how much time do you need to do what you're doing?
I just need a few minutes, like 10 minutes. Can I have up to that?
No, 10 minutes is too much. I'll give you an extra 5 minutes. If you're not done in five
Okay,
minutes,
okay. I can see that on my system I do not have .NET installed, so that is why that command is not recognized. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put up the step to run that in the screen now for everybody to see it. So what you need to do is, because of our time, I will not really go far because of our time. So I'm going to put up the step to run this demo. So I will employ everybody to go do that on their own and see how they can meet up. So the step is, I don't know if you can see my screen. So we have that stages on the screen now. If you when we flow, as we created a project on our Azure DevOps interface, which is this one, and our project is building. So we have this project now. They open now. So we have a when you want to deploy the code, you go to the repo. Under the repo, we have where the files are. You have your already since it's quite unfortunate that my my system one has net installed. That is why this code is not recognized. So, and if the code is recognized, and you should have seen witness that the our project will have been created locally. When you want to create a project locally, after you have installed the .NET can be gotten from the .NET community for free if you are under the developer version. So we have the .NET, you run the code in using your CMD, that is a command prompt on your system. First of all, you need to set up a folder on your local system, just as we did here. This is a folder. Then inside this folder, you click and open it. Then under this search bar, double click here to enter your CMD and all that. So inside this browser, we have created our project. Now to push your code inside, either you are cloning to your computer, you clone a code, assuming you have already hosted a code on the on Azure DevOps, and you need to clone it back to your local system. This is where you can clone it. But since we were going to mean to push code from our local system, so this is the link you go with. By copying here, and maybe the code has gone, or maybe my system recognized the .NET, I will have just paste it here and click enter. Then the local code will push immediately and commit to the original Azure repository. So what you do is to come here and refresh this page. Once you refresh, the code that you push locally will show up here. So how to run a pipeline, which is actually the center of today. So you quickly go to as you're being pushed to Azure DevOps repo, you quickly come to the pipeline center is under on the tab, very popular. So you now click it. Once you click it, okay, open on the left corner of the screen. When you in it, so because of our time now, if you have any question, you can you can reach out to me and or via any of those channels that I provided. My LinkedIn is there and as more, so you can reach out to me there. I will quickly respond to
Hi Imo.
and give
Hi
answers to
Imo.
all your questions. So we have
Hi
no time
Imo.
again. Yeah, yes,
Your
yes, yes,
time is up. You only
yes.
have 1 minute. I want to ask you something. Is it okay if I post your LinkedIn on the chat window for them?
Yes, yes, yes. Post my LinkedIn and also post my this thing. Let me.
So, guys, as much as I would like the event to go on, but I'm sorry we've taken extra 15 minutes. So, if you want to know more, Imo is a very passionate person about Azure DevOps. So, if you want to know more, you can reach out to him on LinkedIn. He will always accept your LinkedIn request, and you can talk to him about anything you want to know about Azure DevOps. So,
Okay, thank you guys.
all we've done today would not have been possible without the support of Microsoft, D Brown Consulting, Hashem, Covenant Technologies, Your Biz Edge, Jira Computer Solution, Afri Logic Solution, Charis Cloud, Rugby, Macintosh, Wiselead, Textilers. So, guys, I appreciate all the time. I appreciate the time that you spent with us. We hope that you'll join us again next year for this same event. And please take time to fill the evaluation form. If you do not fill the evaluation form, there's no how you're going to win the Xbox and other amazing prizes that have been given by the sponsors for this event. So fill the form. You are basically evaluating the speaker for each of their session. So fill the form, and that's basically it, guys. Thank you for having me as your host. No, thank you for having me as your moderator, and I hope to see you guys again next year. Bye.